My name is Ara Maranian. I am the Community Development Director with the City of Rancho Palos Verdes, and I want to thank you for coming out this evening on a Wednesday evening to be a part of tonight's workshop. And tonight's workshop is going to focus primarily on what you're going to learn about is the Wildlife Watch program, and that's going to be later in the workshop. We've got an agenda out in the front that identifies all the different steps and what's going to be discussed this evening. And I understand that you're here this evening because you recognize how important the coyote issue here is in the peninsula, and how to deal with the coyotes and the uptick in the population that we're seeing here in the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And I can tell you from the city's perspective, from Rancho Palos Verdes' perspective, we've been addressing coyotes for almost, I would say, 10 years now, where we've been getting reports from the community and trying to educate the community on things and what to do and how to address coyotes and to not fear the coyote and to rise above the whole situation and how to keep the coyotes out of the neighborhood. So tonight's workshop is being hosted by the cities of Rancho Palos Verdes, Palos Verdes Estates, and Rolling Hills Estates. And this is the first time that we've collaboratively come together and have this peninsula-wide workshop. And the reason why we're doing that is because we recognize in Rancho Palos Verdes that, hey, it's not just a local issue, it's not just a city issue, it's a peninsula-wide issue, it's a region-wide issue. In fact, not only have the cities on the peninsula recognized this concern, but all of the South Bay cities, and we've come together and we have a task force with the South Bay COG in trying to address the coyote issue regionally. And I know the county's represented here this evening from Janice Hahn's office, and thank you for coming out this evening and being a part of it, and because the county's involved in this as well. So to that end, what do we expect you to walk away from this evening? You're gonna get information this evening that's valuable in understanding coyotes and the coyote behavior. You're going to hear about that. We're going to want to hear from you on your experiences, what your expectations are, how you think the city and the community should be addressing this issue. Because from our perspective and what we've learned through all the years of our exposure to this topic is that it's not just addressed by the city. It's got to be done collectively with the community's participation. And so after, we're going to break out into different groups and talk about some of the issues that you're dealing with coyotes, and then resume and come back and talk about this Wildlife Watch program that's being implemented currently by the City of Palos Verdes Estates. And so we're hoping that you're going to walk away with that information. You're going to be able to help the city and step up and volunteer to help get that message across to your neighborhoods. And so this Wildlife Watch program is very similar to Neighborhood Watch, where you're dealing with crime and the whole community or the whole neighborhood's coming together to address crime. Well, this is similar. You're coming together as a neighborhood to address coyotes. So I'm hoping that you're going to walk away with that information and be willing to commit some time, 2 weekends, 2 Saturdays to learn and be a part of this program. And so to that end, I'm going to pass this on to the mayor of Rancho Palos Verdes, Susan Brooks. But before I do that, I want to let the community know that from our city's perspective, I mentioned earlier that we've been dealing with this for 10 years, and Rancho Palos Verdes was the first city to develop a management plan in the South Bay, and I think that was really shepherded by Mayor Brooks, and tonight she was instrumental in putting this all together from the mayor's standpoint. So we appreciate all your efforts in putting this together. And then I just want to get a take for all of our benefits here, because I've got, at these tables here, representatives from the 3 different cities. But how many, by show of hands, how many residents are from Rancho Palos Verdes? Oh, very nice. How many residents are from Rolling Hills Estates? And Palos Verdes Estates? Very good. Okay, well, thank you. The unincorporated area, of course. So to that end, I'm going to ask Mayor Brooks to come up and give some opening remarks.
Thanks, Ara. Welcome, everybody, to our fair city, our now coyote-laden city, right? I want to ask also by a show of hands this evening, how many of you have had an experience with a coyote where you've seen a coyote in your area or you've seen one here on the peninsula? Just raise your hand. Okay, so just about everybody here who is here today has seen a coyote. Oh, I see Mayor Pat Wilson is here from Rolling Hills as well. Thank you, Pat, for being here. We have, on this peninsula, we've got a wonderful community. I've been tooting this horn about coyotes for 8 years, for 10 years. I have 2 little dogs. I have a vested interest. 2 little Bichon dogs, and they're adorable, and they're old now, so they can't move very fast, but I guess that doesn't matter with a coyote, right? But it's very sad, because these become our family members, and we love them. So it's particularly when you become an empty nester, you really start to look at the world differently. And we really are very compassionate, as are all our cities, our sister cities. You know, the coyotes don't just go to Rancho Palos Verdes and stop at the city line. And we have Rolling Hills Estates here and Palos Verdes Estates. It's fantastic that we, as a whole peninsula that are so contiguous, we can work together. And that's been my goal all along. Just as the case with automatic license plate readers that you may see, that we're catching a lot of thieves now in Rancho Palos Verdes and in Palos Verdes Estates and Rolling Hills Estates and Rolling Hills. Why? Because we put all these cameras up. So the cameras are license plate readers, and they tell you when there's a stolen car or a stolen vehicle in either one of the cities, and it's all around the hill. You know, it's kind of like a roach trap. They go in, the Roach Hotel, they go in, but they don't leave. So they don't leave without being caught. And this is what we're basically trying to do here with the coyotes. I'm trying to draw an analogy, is we need to have a program so we're all working together. And that's what Ara, I want to thank Ara because he has been working on this for years. He's had to put up with me complaining about it and trying to get things organized for years on this. And I'm just so grateful that our neighbors, our sister cities are working so closely, and you've got really developed plans, and you've really gone light years going on your programs. So we want to get everybody kind of on the same page. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about something that happened, which indicates to us why it is we need to understand a couple of things need to happen. We need to make sure we know what our neighbors are doing, because I can guarantee that every single person here is probably not feeding the coyotes, right? You're not leaving out water. You're not leaving out food. But you have neighbors who are. So this is going to be about understanding and sort of working together in this neighborhood watch kind of program where we're really working together so that we can work to move the coyotes into areas where they're not going to get food. And they're not going to find that their breakfast is going to be your dog or my cat or your cat. They're going to find something else. About 5 years ago, I was mayor in 2013, and at that time we were chasing the coyotes. You know, it ebbs and flows. You know, it goes down, then they come back up. And at that time, they were up. And we made such a big deal about it in our city that the news team from Channel 4 came out to interview, and they went to a woman's house in our city, an elderly woman, and they actually videotaped her feeding the coyotes in the canyon. And they knocked on her door and they questioned her, and they said, "Are you aware that you cannot, that it's against the law to feed the coyotes?" And she said, "No, I didn't know it was against the law." And they said, "Are you aware that you can get a fine for feeding the coyotes?" And, it's very hard realistically to catch them, right? But this woman was actually caught with a camera because her neighbor contacted the press and said, my neighbor feeds them every single day. So she said, no. And they said, well, why are you feeding the coyotes? She said, well, I don't want them to come to my house, and I don't want them to eat my roof off, because she had a composition roof. She said, so what I do is I go down into the hillside, I go down into the canyon, and I feed them there. So they said, are you aware that your neighbor 2 doors down, the coyotes killed and ate her little dog? And she said, yes, I know that, and that's very sad. But at the end of the day, when they got done and they asked her all about this, and they said, so now that you know that it's against the law and that you can get a fine and that your neighbor's dog was killed, would you do this again? And her reply was, yes. So guys and gals, we got work to do. We're gonna roll up our sleeves. We gotta listen to what the experts are our local staffs. They have actually come together. And we have our gentleman from Fish and Game is here in the back, Dash. And they'll tell you a little bit about the coordinated agencies. So with that, I wanna pass this on to my dear friend and wonderful mayor in our neighboring city, Britt Huff.
Thank you. Thank you for that roaring applause. Wow. Well, thank you, Susan. It's really been great to collaborate with Susan. We both share a strong concern about this because we have pets that we love, and both of us have had interaction with anguished people who have lost their pets, and we can relate to that. So we're very excited about to have this collaboration, and we especially appreciate the City of Rolling Hills of Palos Verdes Estates providing a background on the program that they've started, and we're hoping to tie in on that and develop that throughout the peninsula. But I especially wanted to mention also that our city, in addition to being very involved in responding to our residents regarding these concerns, we have a website with all sorts of information and encouraging our residents to report sightings. One of the reasons that we become more and more concerned, as Susan has mentioned, we also are seeing in the last year even especially more aggressive coyotes who are walking down the middle of our street in the middle of the day, following people on the trails when they're out walking. And so this is sort of a new dimension in terms of seeing coyotes that aren't really scared when you stop and you turn and you throw something or you shout or do any kind of hazing. So we're trying to approach this on many levels, and one of them is working with the county. I've been involved with representing my city with the South Bay Council of Governments, which is a group of the 13 South Bay cities that are all at some level experiencing this. And so we have had the Wildlife Watch at the state level, and the Agriculture Department, and especially the county. And we've appreciated Janice Hahn's support, and in fact, Erica Velasquez, wave over there, is here this evening representing Supervisor Hahn. And so it's really a county-wide concern that we're trying to attack this from. So welcome to all of you. I wanted to especially mention that our city has several staff people here for the breakout sessions. I wanted to introduce Alexa Davis, who is our assistant to the city manager, and Jessica Slauson, and our intern from USC, Maheen Serena. Thank you for coming. So you'll meet them later, and so we look forward to brainstorming, and our hope is that after this evening, you'll come back for the next 2 sessions of training. So thank you very much for being here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alexa Davis. I'm the assistant to the city manager at Rolling Hills Estates. And what my role here tonight is just to kind of provide an overview about coyote behaviors. Some of you have already heard this, so it's old news. You could probably educate me a little bit. But what I wanted to do is provide a PowerPoint that was presented to city staff and, as Mayor Huff alluded, at South Bay Regional Task Force on Coyotes. And this task force has been meeting, I think, about a year now. It is with the 13 cities, and we'll see here coyote issues are spread out in the county. We have a great resource in the Agricultural Commissioner Weights and Measures Division, and this information is directly from them, and we all felt it was a really important message, just so everybody has a basic understanding, and this kind of is a launching point to learn a little bit about how, now that we know the behaviors, how can we address it. So just to start off, just some simple facts. Coyotes have been here. They're considered somewhat native. However, it's been 46,000 years and not forever. So some people kind of dispute that native term, but they have been here quite a while. So I know, as Mayor Brooks mentioned, we've seen the population ebb and flow, and we'll talk a little bit about what helps cause that ebb and flow. So coyote diets, I have the clicker, don't I? Okay. Coyote diets do vary. We hear enough stories about the small pets that they take, but they're very opportunistic animals, and so they take food wherever they can easily find it. And that can include the small rodents, small wildlife, but even fruits and vegetables that you have in your garden, low-hanging fruit off of trees, fallen fruit in your yard, garbage that's not secure, compost that's not secure, and a big culprit is the outdoor pet food. Weight is between 15 and 40 pounds. We often hear on the Hill, hear more around like 20, 35 pounds. They just aren't over 40 pounds. There's not been any cases documented of that. Births are happening right now, mid to late spring. So right now it's probably fairly quiet as far as activity and encounters, although we have seen some uncharacteristic behavior recently, but we will likely see moms going out searching for food soon for their pups, and then soon after that start seeing some more pups coming out. And litters range from 4 to 7 pups. So as I mentioned, this is a county-wide concern, and this map provided by the Agricultural Commission is from 2017 to 2015 data as far as reports to the county. And keep in mind, Rolling Hills Estates and Rancho Palos Verdes directly work with the county, so our reports do go to the county directly. Palos Verdes Estates handles it through a private contractor due to their arrangement with the county. So you can see that this is an elevated issue across the board, and collaboratively with the county, with now the California State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then the Peninsula cities and now South Bay cities, we're trying to tackle it. So just to kind of address some things about coyote behavior, they are most active during between the dusk and dawn. However, it is not uncharacteristic for them to be seen during the day. They do like quiet. So on the Hill, we have a lot of quiet areas. So oftentimes you might see them simply trotting down the street. Again, because the population ebb and flows, some periods of time you see them more often, some periods of time you won't see them at all. And especially if they find a food buffet in your neighborhood, you're certainly going to see them more during the day. Coyotes are extremely shy. So oftentimes when we talk about hazing, and I know that will be addressed throughout the Wildlife Watch training, we talk about scaring them away because they are skittish. They're very curious. They do stop and observe. And when we talk about hazing, the intent is to scare them completely out of sight. They're curious. So when you scare them off for a second, they may go about 10 feet away, but they'll stop and look back. So the intent of hazing and scaring them off is to really scare them out of sight. I know Wildlife Watch will address those situations where maybe they aren't scared, and that's where there's each city has a different tool in the toolbox to address those situations. So we unfortunately know that coyotes are living and thriving in our neighborhoods. We have a lush area on the peninsula. There's a lot of places where they can thrive without being in our neighborhoods. And I think that that's the intent of all the cities, is to make sure that they are pushed into the wild and not affecting our properties and our neighborhoods. So what we've found across the county, but specifically on the Hill, is intentional feeding. And Mayor Brooks mentioned a pretty significant story, but sadly, this is the kind of things that this city staff hear on a regular basis. People, they have well-meaning purposes in trying to feed, leave pet food out, build shelters. I can tell you these are not pictures on the peninsula, but this does happen. So there's the intentional feeding, and then there's the unintentional feeding. You can see they can easily reach, bird baths, water fountains. Bird feeders, actually, it's recommended you take them inside because they are attracted to rodents, which then attract the coyotes. So there's a lot of things that can be done in your own property to really safeguard the property, and that's something also Wildlife Watch will help teach. And then, of course, up here, we have the ability to have a lot of extra pets. So from free-roaming pets to caged animals, eggs, a lot of, fruit trees. So there's a lot of opportunity for coyotes, but there's also a lot of opportunity for us to safeguard our properties. I'm just going to briefly touch on this. Rancho Palos Verdes and Rolling Hills Estates have adopted the LA County Code of Title 10 of animals. This specifically does have a prohibition on feeding wildlife, specifically the predators, which would include coyotes. And this is the kind of enforcement level if city staff needed to proceed. And we do recommend that neighbors talk to each other first, but certainly let us know if there's a regular concern. And I can speak on behalf of Rolling Hills Estates. One of our first steps is education. But people still feed. So just some quick tips. Again, a lot of this many people have already heard, but just keeping your own property safeguarded, keeping garbage cans closed. If you have concerns, I know we have in our city where we've talked to the waste hauler themselves as well to make sure after they've left specifically commercial areas, making sure that the lids remain closed. Keeping your small pets indoors, especially at night. One of the worst inventions in this era right now with coyotes is the doggy door. So understanding, the difficulty in having the doggy door and having the pet freely in and out. Keeping pet food indoors or at least removing it when the pet's completed, making sure that you're picking up all that fallen fruit on your properties, covering any compost piles, and then again mentioning the bird feeders, putting them away at night or not having them. And then a really important aspect is clearing brush and dense weeds around the property, anything that could be potential hiding spots or cover for the coyotes. Some other safety tips to consider. Every city has a specific ordinance on fences, so certainly check with your city department. But generally, you want to look at a 6 feet high fence. Now, that coyotes certainly jump 6 feet. So the other option is to have a roller. There's a lot of contraptions that can help deter the coyotes. And, through the Wildlife Watch program, you'll hear all about these types of deterrents. Enlist neighbors and work together in a neighborhood, hopefully through a Wildlife Watch program, and educate each other. I know in Rolling Hills Estates, staff is available to go and meet with HOAs. We try to have these kind of meetings as well. So, and we can coordinate with the state wildlife department as well as the county to come out and help educate. Walking with your dog, I believe all 3 cities have leash laws. So it's important to keep the dog on the leash. Our biggest message when we talk to people is it's for the safety of your own dog. Keeping that leash no more than 6 foot. Walking with a partner if possible, strength in numbers, noise and such does certainly scare off coyotes. One thing, just as a side note, that I've dealt with is concerns about coyotes around Little League areas. And generally speaking, when there's a lot of commotion and noise and activity, the coyotes aren't going to come out in those areas. They are afraid of all that commotion. Avoiding the heavy brush, low visibility areas. We have a lot of that here just by the nature of the peninsula. So just being attentive, especially if you see on our peninsula reporting site a hot spot in a particular area, just understanding, turning corners if there's low bush, just being attentive and aware of your surroundings. And then also the education to children. We really want to make sure children understand that coyotes are not dogs, are not pets, that they don't run from the coyote, and that they absolutely tell an adult and get involved as soon as possible. A lot of people, we do have coyote lovers as well, and people admire them, but that's okay. Admire them from afar. Don't get them accustomed to coming up to you and feeding out of your hand. That's happened in some other areas. We haven't had any reports here. Certainly not offering food. Again, I want to reiterate, we don't turn our backs away. We don't run from the coyote. The best thing to do is carrying something, a noise, rocks, something to really scare off that coyote. And then again, when you're walking pets, to keep them on a leash at all times. If a coyote were to approach you, hopefully not when, the big thing is to make yourself appear larger, scaring it away, clapping, whistling. We always recommend, when you are a regular walker, hiker, carry something that automatically creates noise, whether it's whistles. Some people, if they've trained dogs, they know the little trick with pennies in an empty aluminum can, and that's a terrible noise. So there's just certain things you can do. On your own property, you can spray water from hoses, you can have squirt guns with vinegar. It's important to kind of change it up on your property, because coyotes can get a little accustomed, and they will know your behavior after a while. But certainly you want to do things that will deter the coyote and not make it easy to come upon your property. And of course, goes without saying, but an immediate threat, an immediate attack, please call 911. All other encounters, activities should be reported through the channels that we have, which we have a brochure that was provided this evening. Any actual bites on a person would be worked through emergency services, but also reported to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who will do research and DNA testing, and certainly there would be a review of the coyote to match DNA. So just a last word from the county that they provided. What they've seen in their research over the years is that we've actually taught the coyotes to associate people with food. We've either fed them, we have our scent on our pet food, which welcomes the coyotes to our yard to eat the pet food. So now we need to retrain them. We need to retrain ourselves and retrain them to make sure that they understand that they should not be around our properties and ourselves. So just to kind of reiterate some of our reporting options, which are all outlined in your brochure, the 3 cities have come together and developed a online reporting system. And there's a couple of different ways you can get there. It's all the same site, but what we certainly encourage is anybody to report an activity, an encounter. It helps the cities to kind of know where the hotspots are, know what kind of activity is happening. We work together with that information. We share it with the county, the state. There's a researcher out of UC Irvine Extension Program. She's doing a lot of research on coyote behavior. This information is readily available to her as well. So we appreciate the information. The other thing it does is it helps us know how to respond. We have, generally speaking, most of the cities have a tiered response plan, and based on the type of coyote report, we follow this response plan and help educate or help bring a county inspector out and do some further inspection to determine what mechanisms should be taken. And this is where Wildlife Watch can assist us in helping us with that communication and education effort.
May we have your attention, please, everybody? Captain Best from the Palos Verdes Estates Police Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, hey.
See, I'll start the applause.
Hi, my name is Tony Best, and I'm a captain with the Palos Verdes Estates Police Department.
We have a problem in the back.
Nope. My name is Tony Best, and I'm a captain with the Palos Verdes Estates Police Department. And you're probably wondering why the police department is involved with coyotes. Well, sometimes I ask myself that very question, especially when I'm also dealing with peacocks. So in part of my division, I handle animal control. So peacocks and coyotes fall under my division. So I got involved with coyotes and Wildlife Watch program through the state program run by California State Fish and Wildlife. And Dave Dodge is one of their volunteers who helps communities like ours establish Wildlife Watch programs that really gets the community involved and taking ownership in participating in managing wildlife in their areas. So the breakout sessions that we just had, I talked to my colleagues over here, and there was a consistent theme that there needs to be more information out there. A lot of people are getting their information from Nextdoor, and Nextdoor can be a very crazy place. It can be very crazy for information. There's a lot of bad information out there. We want people to seek sources of information that's valid, that is in line with what we're trying to accomplish here in the 3 cities on the peninsula in regards to Wildlife Watch management. So our goal is to provide information, resources, and more importantly, a vehicle for which members of the community can take an active role in keeping coyotes wild. We want to have coyotes, but we want to keep them wild. We do not want them habituated to the point where they do not fear humans, and they come into our yards, they come on our streets, they're out in the daytime, they're wandering around schools, so we want to keep them wild where coyotes need to be in the open space, in the canyons and nice areas of Palos Verdes Estates and Rolling Hills and Rancho PV. So what is a Wildlife Watch program that everyone keeps talking about and that you all are going to be champions of here after you leave tonight, right? You're not leaving until you guys sign up. Okay, so Wildlife Watch program is an educational program partnering citizens and agencies utilizing the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Natural Resource Volunteer Program. And that's Dave Dodge in the back there. The program was modeled after another well-known program that's been highly successful throughout the nation, and that's Neighborhood Watch, okay? The program is educational based, and again, it partners with different aspects of the community members, other stakeholder groups, and with the state Fish and Wildlife Management. Neighbors getting to know each other and working together. This model helps residents take an active role in their own neighborhoods to help educate their neighbors on coyote issues. Citizens are going to be trained to understand the difference between sightings, just a normal coyote behavior, imminent threats, and physical contact. Also, what's natural and unnatural wildlife behavior. So if you're out hiking on one of the trails here on one of the bluffs, and you see a coyote and the coyote looks at you, turns around, stops, runs about 10 feet, and then looks at you again and takes off and runs, that's normal coyote behavior. And we'll talk about that in the subsequent trainings that we have. Coyote behavior that's concerning and is not natural is if that coyote is on the trail and you're walking towards it and the coyote doesn't move, it's kind of standing its ground. Maybe its hackles start to go up, it shows its teeth. That's unnatural behavior, and that's very concerning. And for some reason, that coyote does not fear humans, and we do not want to ever have to get to that point where a coyote is habituated and lost its fear or loses its fear of humans. So each Wildlife Watch member will be provided training by the state, who has been instrumental in establishing these programs, mainly here in Southern California. The knowledge learned during these training sessions will help be shared with Wildlife Watch members as they go out into the community to help answer questions and build a more educated, safe community. And let me talk about kind of the model or the approach to dealing with issues in any cities when it deals with government, and kind of the old model. And this is kind of, I think it could be applied to any type of issue or problem. The traditional model, which is shown here, addresses issues like this and others. So it could be speeding vehicles, it could be crime, it could be graffiti. Ours happens to be coyote. On the left, you see a coyote, and that's our issue. In the middle, you have some of the stakeholder groups. You have schools, the community, some businesses, or interest groups. On the right, you have the central government or your local government, the city or the county, depending on where you live. This model calls for each stakeholder group to identify an issue and then look for the government for an answer. Sometimes the government is not the answer, and sometimes the government shouldn't be fixing all the problems by themselves for resource reasons and for, I believe we have a lot of smart people in our community, and we need to tap those resources. And just in the little group that we had over here, there were some ideas that none of us thought of. And we're going to take those back and we're going to incorporate those into our programs. So just in the 5-10 minutes we had over in this session over here, we learned from you, and we would continue to do that. And we think problem solving is more effective when the entire community is involved, not just the community looking for the government to fix the problem. So this is the model that I like, and I think it's the best approach. And this is the one that Wildlife Watch tries to establish and promote. This model directs the stakeholders' efforts away from seeking a government solution to a problem and shifts the focus on working together to develop the solution. So this is more of like a Wildlife Watch. So you got schools, the central government working together, businesses, interest groups, and the community all working on the problem and not expecting someone else to do it for them. So you may ask why Wildlife Watch is needed. Well, the first reason is the government, we can't do it all by ourselves. Okay, you're in the community, you know your community probably better than anybody because you're on it all the time. You walk up and down your streets, you know your neighbors, you know what's going on. So many of these wildlife conflicts exist because of attractants. That simply means that coyotes frequent an area because there's a source of food or water or shelter. Neighbors either knowingly or unknowingly provide food, water, and shelter for wildlife. So knowingly providing food is what the mayor over here talked about, intentional feeding. And sometimes people believe that the animals are going to starve if they don't feed them. The animals aren't going to starve. They're very smart. They've been around for, 46,000 years or more, right? They're going to be around without us. They're going to do okay. It's extremely dangerous to start feeding these coyotes, not only for the person feeding, but for the entire community, because you're going to habituate that animal, and that animal is going to begin to associate food with humans, and the next time someone's walking with their child or with their dog, they're going to go up to them looking for a source of food. It's also dangerous for the animal itself, not to mention it is illegal. Unknowingly, and Alexa talked about this, and the unknowingly feeding coyotes could come in the form of feeding your cat or dog outdoors and leaving the food out, a doggy door, fallen fruit, bird feeders, things of that nature. And Wildlife Watch will help go out into the community and educate people on those people who may not know they're actually feeding coyotes unknowingly. There's simply not enough animal service agencies or law enforcement officials to educate the community, and that's where your help is needed the most. And this is perhaps the greatest need addressed by the Wildlife Watch program. It serves as a force multiplier when resources at the state, local, and county levels are stretched thin. Citizens in the community may know about wildlife issues in their neighborhood that local agencies have not been aware of. And as our Wildlife Watch program walk neighborhoods, we learned that everybody knows if somebody's feeding a coyote in their neighborhood. Everybody knows that person. But if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. Everybody knows the person that lets their dogs run around 2, 3 in the morning in the front yard and the side yard. If we don't educate them, then their pet is vulnerable to being taken by a coyote. So you know your neighborhood better than we do, and that's why it's important that you partner with us to get out into your neighborhood and educate your neighbors to make it a safer place. So how do we get started? So tonight's the first informational session, and after tonight, hopefully you are so inspired to make your community better and to make your pets safer and the coyotes safer where they need to be, that you're going to sign up for the next 2 sessions, and you're going to learn a lot about coyotes and how to get out into the community, meet your neighbors, and educate them. So we're going to have 2 training sessions provided by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, where you're going to learn about coyote facts, behavior, what's natural, what's not natural, what's learned behavior. You're going to learn about attractants, more of what Alexa talked about. You'll learn about each city's coyote management plan and response plan. Each city has a tiered response, so it's if A happens, then we do B or C. So, and that helps guide us to ensure that we've done every single thing we can to make sure these coyotes do not become habituated. Because our goal is to keep those coyotes wild and keep humans safe, keep our pets safe, and keep our kids safe. You'll learn about hazing, and that's just a simple act of doing something to the coyote or an animal that does not harm them, but makes the encounter with a human very uncomfortable. It could be noise, it could be water. They have a natural fear of us, and we need to constantly instill that fear in the coyotes. You also go out in the field and do some field training and practical application on the second day. So let me talk a little bit about the field work that you'll do as a Wildlife Watch member. You're going to go out and you're going to educate the community. You'll knock on doors with a partner in your neighborhood and just walk around with the brochures and talk to people. You'll show them what they should be doing with their trash cans, with removing attractants from their yards. They may have questions about what hours the coyotes are seen in the city, what their breeding patterns are, things of that nature, and you'll be able to answer those for them. You'll look for problem areas, and there's also something called directed patrols. So if you look here on the, there's a map with a bunch of dots on it. That's the Peninsula City's Coyote Sighting Report website. And when you report coyote sightings, even if it's just a normal coyote behavior, it'll appear on this map. And we can kind of determine from the map where the hot spots are, where we're seeing a lot of sightings or activity that could be indicative of we may have a habituated coyote on our hands and we need to go out and do some further investigations. And those Wildlife Watch members will go out to those areas and canvass the area, talk to neighbors, gather more information, and further educate them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our program in Palos Verdes Estates. It's a little different than the standard Wildlife Watch program because we started ours with existing volunteers. They're volunteers who are trained by the police department. They drive around in white cars. They do home vacation checks. They do traffic control. They patrol our parklands. They do a whole host of things in the community for the community to make it better. So one of the things we did, we expanded their role and trained them to be Wildlife Watch members. Our volunteers pick an area where coyote activity is observed, and usually it's based on the map, or if I get a couple phone calls from residents, and we dispatch them out to the area where we're seeing these incidents occur. Again, we do directed patrols to specific areas. They go door to door to help educate the community. One of the big things they do, a lot of people don't know where to report coyote activity. If they see a coyote, or if, say, their pet is taken by a coyote, a lot of times their first resource is to go on Nextdoor and report it there. In the cities, we don't monitor Nextdoor. That's a neighbor-to-neighbor conversation. Did you say you don't want to? Oh, Nextdoor is designed to be a neighbor-to-neighbor communication, and the government doesn't. We don't monitor neighbor-to-neighbor conversations. So they go out and they educate the community on the proper ways to report coyote activity. They also offer to perform yard audits, and that's where our volunteers go around and they'll walk around your yard if you want them to, and they'll identify some areas of concern. It could be that your trash cans aren't secure. There may be holes in your fences. There may be composting that is accessible and maybe an attractant. So what we want to do is remove those attractants from your yard or identify them. That way the coyotes have no reason to come into your yard and they just stay in the canyon. The Wildlife Watch Program plays a vital role in keeping communities educated and safe. And hopefully after this meeting, again, that you participate, because obviously there's an interest level in coyotes, and from what I heard in my group here, there may be some people that don't come to meetings, who don't ask questions. Just because they don't try and they're not interested is never going to dissuade us from trying. And we're always going to be interested. We're always going to try, because that's our job. Our job is to make our communities safe and to make them better. And because you're here tonight, I know that you guys feel the same way. Hopefully you'll sign up and you'll get to know your neighbors and you'll spread good information out there so that we develop safer neighborhoods and we can keep the coyotes wild. So thank you.
Well, we're at the end of our workshop here, and I want to thank Alexa and Captain Beth for their informative presentations, and all the staff from our sister cities here who have taken the time to be here and to participate and to help educate you. And I have to tell you, with the group that I facilitated, I heard someone say, hey, you know, the coyotes are coming into our neighborhoods because of the drought and fires. And I want to tell you, that's not why coyotes are coming into your neighborhood. I want to dispel that rumor. Coyotes, they've been around longer than we have, and they're coming into neighborhoods. Why? Because of, like Captain Beth said, we're providing them with the food, the water, and the shelter. So those three things, you've got to, those are attractants. You've got to take those attractants out of the equation so that the coyotes find out, they say, hey, that neighborhood doesn't have a food source, that they don't have a shelter source for me, so I'm going to go find another area and I'm going to stay in the wild. If we make it easier for them, they're not going to be searching for their food. They're going to come up to our neighborhoods. And so Palos Verdes Estates, they've launched this Wildlife Watch program. The city of Rancho Palos Verdes and Rolling Hills Estates, we want to launch the program too, but we need your assistance. The common denominator here is that we have, as a community, not just government, not Fish and Wildlife, but we, all of us, have to work together to get the upper hand on this and to work as a community to educate, so that we understand that, hey, the food sources, the shelter sources need to be shut down so that the coyotes stay in the wild and they don't come into our neighborhoods. So to that end, I'm pleading to you. You're here because you're interested. You're a stakeholder. You want to help get this information out. We've got sign-in sheets. I'm going to ask my colleagues to go out in the lobby. And as you leave here, we're asking you to become volunteers. That means you're going to have to commit 2 Saturdays, Saturday, April 28th, next weekend from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the second session is going to be Saturday, May 5th from noon to 4 p.m. And you have to be willing to attend both of those sessions because the information you're going to get at those 2 sessions are what you're going to use when you're the boots on the ground out there knocking on doors such as that representative from Palos Verdes States is doing. We need you to do that to get that information out. And I know on behalf of Rancho Palos Verdes, we think this is really important. We want to educate the public. We want to step up this and implement this program because it's been known to be effective in Irvine, in Culver City. They've had complete success with this wildlife watch program. I think it's worth trying here in the peninsula. We see it as a region-wide issue, and we need your help. So thank you for coming out Wednesday night. We're actually ending a half hour earlier, and sign up, and we look forward to seeing you at those workshops. Thank you.